Welcome to Next Level Greatness, the podcast. Around here, we'll be talking about all things expansion, going from good to great and from great to greatness. I'm your host, Barbie. Get ready for your next level. Let's do this. Welcome to Next Level Greatness, the podcast. I am so excited to share with you today on the topic of becoming limitless. It's a process, number one. But before we begin, I have to celebrate something with you. Last week, I celebrated that we reached our 10,000 downloads and that it's in our nature. I think it's in our nature. It's in our conditioning to compare ourselves to other people who maybe have millions of downloads. Well, about 8 months ago, a friend of mine said, Barbie, you are going to become a household name. And it was the first time that vision was planted in my brain. And I was like, oh my God, I can become a household name. And so I was looking at some of the data, not obsessed with metrics, but I saw that all of a sudden I have listeners from, of course, I've always had 88% or 90% of my listeners are from the United States. About 4% are from Canada. But out of nowhere, I want to acknowledge the listeners that I have. And actually, it might be a listener that I have in the Philippines, in Portugal, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in France, in South America, in Colombia, in Germany, in India, in St. Lucia, in Poland, and there's one more, Puerto Rico. Wow. And it's 1% of my listeners. And like I said, it just might be one human. But when you think of the number of people that are in each of these locations, that there's one human out there that is tuning in. And I actually had a woman from the Philippines reach out to me who watches my stories on Instagram. And she said something about the Philippines. I'm like, you're my listener. She's like, oh my God, you caught me. But why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because a lot of times we think that our manifestation is not happening because what we see in front of us is either not there or it's so small that it may seem insignificant. And this is where so many people get it wrong. Because when we appreciate and are open to the small things, which are not small things, a human being in any country is a human being somewhere in the world that matters and that is tuning in. But we're so used to the metrics, we're so used to the big numbers, we're so used to downplaying what's happening with ourselves that the universe is like, you are ungrateful. Why am I going to trust you with the big things when you can't even celebrate the small things? So I see this trend happening, the trend that people are coming. I'm getting more and more comments and messages from people just kind of like casually assuming that I take it for granted or that I know that people are listening to my podcast. And I don't, you guys. I don't take it for granted. I'm celebrating everything and I'm actually screenshotting the 1% listeners that I have in all these parts of the world. And I'm going to do a post when I have many, many listeners just to prove that point. That we all have to start somewhere. So if you're in any of these countries or in a country that I haven't mentioned, including, I have mentioned, of course, the United States and Canada, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. You mean so much to me, and I don't think that you realize that. And please do leave a review on Apple. They really make a difference. And they're kind of hard to come by because people listen but usually don't leave reviews. So I really do want to ask you, please do take the time to leave a review on Apple. It makes a huge, huge difference. All right, let's jump into our topic of becoming limitless. How do we become limitless? I want to bring in the topic of money into this idea of becoming limitless. Not because what we're trying to do is accumulate a bunch of money and just swim in it and make snow angels, although that could be fun if they're clean bills, but because the way that we become abundant or wealthy is through recognizing our limitless nature. And hold up a second. Of course, there are lots of bad people out there that are making tons of money. But what we want is to feel good about ourselves as human beings and to prosper. The problem that I'm seeing is that most people, I really dare say most people that are not super, super wealthy, they have been so conditioned, which means that they have been taught, whether it was directly or indirectly through modeling, through whatever they see on TV, through just everything, society in general. The picture that society presents of people with money is an unattractive one. And so why would we want that? Why would we want to be like the ice queen on TV who is rich but has a terrible relationship with her children or treats people like crap? I see that all the time and it drives me crazy. Does that mean that there are no rich women who are doing that? No, of course not. But I know poor people who treat other people like crap. And I've been both. I've been both rich and poor. I don't know if I've treated people like crap. I'm sure somewhere along the way I've made mistakes. But money hasn't been a factor, is what I'm trying to say. Whatever we believe about our own nature, about ourselves as being capable or incapable, whatever we believe about money has been handed down to us from generation to generation to generation. And we carry that perspective. We have one perspective. The way we see the world is the way we see the world, right? That is our perspective. But the great news is that we can change this perspective. We can expand. And this is why you're listening to this podcast. This is why you take courses. This is why you might be putting yourselves in or making an effort to put yourselves in different kinds of rooms where different people have different perspectives. A student in my Unchained class the other day asked me, Barbie, how did you go from being and feeling so ashamed of having bunk beds in your living room to the point that I made up a lie? This is when I was a child, when a friend came over, and I never used to bring people over because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that we lived in such a tiny apartment and that it was so raggedy. Everything was from stuff that we had collected in the streets or hand-me-downs. And it was kind of a mess. And I was ashamed that we were poor. I was ashamed of the bunk beds in the living room. And I made up a lie. And I said that they had done some construction and they had taken that wall down and that it was going to come back up eventually. And so my student asked me, how did you go from being that person to becoming a multimillionaire, to becoming this woman that is so free now? And I said, there's absolutely no way that I could answer that question in a nutshell or in the space of even an hour class. But I do have all the podcast episodes and I have my courses where we really dig into that. But in a nutshell, if I do try to answer it, is awareness of how we think, what our patterns are, what we believe right now about our own nature and about money. And only when you really become aware of what it is that you're facing, who you think you are, what your beliefs are around money and being limited or limitless, will you truly, truly be able to bring about profound change. And I have to tell you, when I look at my success story, when I graduated from my PhD, I started my job as a professor, and then I started my business in network marketing. When I had success, I was doing
personal development. I was listening to the classics like Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar. I was listening to music that talked about like, if I had $1 million, and I would visualize. I don't believe that I consciously knew what I was doing. It wasn't like I actually sat down to say, okay, I realize I'm aware that these are my patterns and I'm going to change them consciously. For me, it happened very innately. But the reason that I love to teach this stuff is that because it doesn't come innately to most people. If you know that you are capable, and let me tell you, I work with intelligent, capable people, human beings that have great positions in life, that have great jobs, that are in good relationships, but many of them feel like there's like a little block. There's something that they're not seeing and they can't identify it that is not allowing them to go to that next level. And this is where someone like myself comes in. This is what we work on. And I have had to not outsource, but I have had to seek help for different things, guidance, mentorship. I'm going to use all the support that I can while I'm alive so that I can become the most self-expressed person and who I am here to be on this planet. I easily and happily invest in myself and do the things that I need to do so that I can reach that next level. And sometimes it does happen naturally, and I'm not even aware that I'm doing something. But I guess this is where it's my gift, and I get to share this with you. The first question for you is, what are your beliefs around money? What do you believe about earning money? I have an example of a few of the women in my last Money Magnet course. So I have women who are very successful. They love their positions with work, and they just could not see for a while how it would be possible to become a money magnet, how it would be possible to call in more financial abundance in their life without working more. And through the work that we did together, first of all, they examined those beliefs because they were able to verbalize the belief that, like, I just don't see how it could bring in more money when I just don't have more time in my schedule. I'm already working a lot. I volunteer. I do this with the kids. Like, I can't do anymore. And so they felt in some ways stuck at that level. But when they were able to open themselves up to receiving and allowing, this is when money, like unexpected money from different sources, was able to come in the form of like thousands of dollars in a refund check, thousands of dollars in like an insurance refund. I mean, it was unbelievable how money just started coming in. Did this happen for everybody? No, but that's not the point. The point is that they were able to go from, this is my limited perspective of how money can be earned. And they thought that you have to, like many people, they thought that you have to work really, 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 really hard for money. And that's it. And then if you want more money, you have to do much more for it. But in the course of our work, in the course of really understanding how manifestation, energetics, allowing, receiving work, money was able to start coming in. And so that's just one example. I wanted to share a little bit about myself and my money stories. And I've talked about it in previous episodes, but you may not have listened to all of them or even some of them. Maybe this is your first time. Because I grew up so poor, I really thought that you couldn't actually earn a lot of money and do good. And it's always, I'm a teacher in my soul, in my core, and I've always had it as my intention to do good in this world. And so for me, it was impossible. I was completely unopen to this idea that I could do both. The other day, I saw an Instagram post that said, The world doesn't need more successful people. It needs more healers, more spiritual guides, more teachers, something like that. And I said, I absolutely agree. But why can't we? That's one way of thinking of things, right? Why can't we have both? Like, why is it a bad thing that you can be a healer and that you can't be successful? Like, what is the problem? People are happy to pay for services. I mean, they're paying hundreds of dollars for, I don't know, shoes, $1,000 for shoes or something like that, or a trip, or to get your nails done all the time. Like, why can't a spiritual person, a healer, also make money? There's abundance in this world. And it's time that we rewrite the paradigm. I have another woman who I believe will be a guest next week. She's a really dear friend of mine who took my money magnet course, and she's a spiritual guide. She's a priest, actually, in her religion. And clients were not coming in. They were not coming in. And I can't wait for you to hear from her directly. She's so amazing. And I was like, well, first of all, I think you're not showing yourself fully on your Instagram. So I think that is part of the problem. But the second thing was that there were these money stories and old beliefs that had her stuck. And when she examined them, it was like somebody freaking took the cork off the champagne. And so we chatted the other day and she's like, Barb, the clients are coming. The clients are coming now. It's a lot. And this is why I cannot wait for you to listen in. So don't miss next week's episode. If all is good, it will be during the next episode. But if not, then it'll be after that. But we can absolutely change the way that we think about money, our identity with money, the way we relate to money, which changes everything. Because if you have a business, what do you want? You want clients. So it's not that you're focused on the money. It's not like, ooh, I'm money hungry. No, you want to work with the clients. And yes, you want the money. Can you give yourself permission to make that money and to make an impact? But I said I was going to talk about my own money stories. And my own money story is that I really thought that making money was a bad thing and helping people. And the way that I was able to change that, it was through personal development. I read one book in particular, The Success Principles, and I don't think it was anything really in particular that he said, Jack Canfield, the author. It was more his example. He is an example of someone who is a multi-millionaire and who really is, I don't know what he's up to lately, but back then he was really doing, and I'm sure he is still really doing good in the world. And so he was an example of someone doing what I didn't think was possible. That's another tip for you. Look for people that you respect, that you look up to, who are abundant, who do have a more limitless nature, or at least, you don't go from being limited, completely limited in your thinking, to becoming limitless. I can absolutely tell you that I'm still working on becoming limitless. I don't believe that I've reached my ultimate capacity of being unlimited. I'm working on it, and we're doing this journey together. I can tell you that I'm changing and that I'm evolving, and that with every month, I feel myself expanding. And so I definitely want to invite you on this journey as I'm expanding. So seeing examples of other people who have done what you would like to do and are great role models for you, that's definitely one example. But there's so many different ways to rewire your brain. And I've talked about these. In episode 40, I've talked about identity. Really, how do we rewrite a new story for ourselves? In episode 36, and I will link it in the show notes below, I talk about vision boards, creating a vision board, and how we can use our vision boards to rewire our brain, to rewrite our stories, to give our brains these messages of what it is that we want to create. And oh my gosh, I was watching this video on YouTube, talk about how we get programmed. And it was called billionaire. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. I have really no desire to be a billionaire. It doesn't speak to me. But that's not the point. I was watching the billionaire visualization of all these incredible homes and yachts, and I don't like yachts. I actually do not like being on boats. But I was watching it, and what I noticed was that this particular person who did the video chose all very young, so gorgeous women who were supermodel thin with supermodel bodies, or when the women were together, they were like together, but you could tell that they were waiting for the man who had the money to show up. That was my feeling. So the video was clearly created for a heterosexual man who was the billionaire visualizing, and that the women were there for his pleasure. Like even the way the women were coming out of the water, super sexy. Great, they're super sexy and they're gorgeous. But it was clear that it was not about the woman's pleasure, that this was not a visualization for a woman. And also, this visualization, it was like 2-3 hours long, and I was just watching some of it and analyzing, because that's what I do. I observe and I analyze. It was very young. I want to say they were in their 20s and 30s, white, gorgeous men and women only. So there was absolutely no space for anyone that didn't have the perfect body, that was of a different color, that was of a different age group. And it was so biased. And the programming, this is the programming that we get from society. And yet the reality is that we can be who we are and we can create something amazing. And maybe you're right. I mean, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking like, wait a second, there aren't that many billionaires, but do you want to be a billionaire? I mean, I actually don't. And I was thinking of Shaquille O'Neal. There was a little short video on YouTube. I do watch a lot of YouTube. There was a little bit video on YouTube where he was saying when he went to buy his mom a house and the lady asked to check his credit. Now, Shaquille O'Neal is a billionaire. And he was like, what? He's like, you want to check my credit? He's like, you don't have to check my credit. Just get the house. Like, I just want to get the house. So there are many different kinds of role models. But if your goal is to be a millionaire or a multimillionaire or to make 6 figures or whatever your goal and your dream is, you absolutely can find people that are like you, like me, that are just different, right? So if you're not 20-something, 30-something white male, white woman and gorgeous looking by a certain standard, it doesn't mean that you can't achieve something. It's not at all. It's just the programming. That's the nonsense programming. And so we have to overcome that. And we have to know that we get to do things differently. But then also, just because something doesn't exist doesn't mean that you can't create it. And now I'm talking about, I'll give you an example of my business. I feel like the model in network marketing was like, work your butt off, get on a million Zoom calls. There's so many team calls, all this stuff. And I honestly, I was tired of that model. I wasn't willing to do it. And so I took a step back for a long time. And I said to myself, I'm like, how do I want to work this business? How do I want to grow in this business? And I created it. So I have a whole new system. It didn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, you get to create it. And that is so powerful. So there are many different ways I kind of got on a tangent there, but it's okay. There are many different ways to rewire your brain. I talked about episode 40. I talked about episode 36. And lastly, episode 31, where I talk about the 4 ways to harness the power of your subconscious mind. And you can check that out. And this is really an invitation. What I'm saying is resonating with you. I'm going to be launching Money Magnet, the 3rd edition. The 3rd edition of Money Magnet, I have refined it. I have changed so much myself, as I've said, as a human being, that it's like I'm nuancing it. I'm adding different levels of understanding the more clients I have. And so this is your invitation. I'm going to give a $100 off coupon for those that are on the waiting list. The link is below if you want to join the waiting list, and you can absolutely send me a message to get the link. If you're ready to sign up and you want some special pricing, just send me a message and I'm going to hook you up. The best way to reach me is through Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Barbie.Kalev. It's going to be freaking incredible. I'm so excited. All right. This episode is getting long, but I'm going to keep going for a little bit because I have one question for you. And that is, well, when in your life have you felt limited, or where in your life have you felt limited? That is a question that you might want to journal on, that you might want to voice memo on, because I love this question. I did it myself. We don't have time to talk about it now, but I really saw the areas in my life where I'm still limiting myself. I'm still feeling limited. And then I asked myself this question, which opened up this beautiful insight. When in my life have I really felt limitless? And I thought about it, and it was the time when I had been a coach with Beachbody Now Body, maybe 2 years. I was only making $500 a week or something like that, which was amazing, right? $500 a week is amazing. But that was a period where I really let myself run free in my imagination of what's possible. I had spent a summer in California, in Santa Monica, and I remember saying to myself, I'm going to be able to buy or to live in a high rise right on the beach. And guess what? 2 years later, I was doing that. I had an apartment. We were just talking about it, Siggy and I. A beautiful apartment on the beach, so magnificent, because I allowed myself to dream it. I also saw examples of people in the business who were doing amazing, and they were normal people. There was one guy who was a police officer who I knew was making 6 figures, another woman who was also making multiple 6 figures, and she was quote unquote just a mom, an amazing, incredible human being that I'm actually friends with now. But I saw these examples of other people succeeding, and I asked myself, why not me? And the biggest thing is that I allowed myself to dream, and I was inspired. I was loving what I did. In human design, I'm a generator, and generators, we'll talk about that another day. I have another guest that I said I would bring on, Jen. But generators, when they're lit up by something, they could work all day long. They could do all the things, and they become magnetic. And that was absolutely me. And I did the things, and I wasn't overworking during this period. And now also finally, I was deep into personal development. So these are all the different elements. You can go back and listen to this podcast and think for yourself, what can I do for myself so that I can expand where I am right now? If you're feeling limited and you want to become more limitless. So limitless has no boundaries. And I truly believe that is our true nature. But we begin by expanding. It's, where are you limited? Where can you allow yourself to dream? And then who can be an example? Where can I find examples of people that are succeeding at levels that I want to succeed at? And by success, that's a big blanket word. Success is whatever you want success to be. And where can I get into the room so that I can be with people who are doing extraordinary things? Because what happens when you get in the room with people, whether it's a mentor or a group of people, and that is what's happening in my Money Magnet course. That's exactly what happened in my Unchained course, is that people, you calibrate like a guitar, like an instrument. You just tune yourself so that you can not become the person that somebody else is, but you rise to that level. And it's freaking amazing. So with that, I'm going to leave you. Go ahead and get yourself on the waiting list below so that you can get $100 off. If you are ready to purchase right now and you want and you'd like to get the super early bird pricing, just shoot me a message, barbie.collab on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me. I love this podcast more and more, and I'm so grateful for you. I will see you next time.
If you loved this episode and if you're loving my podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. They really do make a difference in spreading the word and having more people be impacted. Also, I'd love for you to join me in my Facebook community called The Magnetic Portal. You can find the link in the show notes. I'll see you next time.